Much. I'm delighted to be here. Again, my name is Anthea Perkinson. I'm a certified financial planner and enrolled agent. I'm also the content developer for a nonprofit called Money Made Simple that was started by a private philanthropist in New York City to bring financial education to underserved populations in and around New York City. So today, I am very happy to be talking to you about managing your finances in uncertain times. We have certainly experienced some uncertain times. I think everyone would agree that what this COVID pandemic has been like in lived experience since the middle of March has been really frightening at times, deeply unsettling, and certainly has had a dramatic impact on both our emotional and financial situations. So what I'm going to share with you are 5 simple actions you can take to shore all of that up. I want you to feel more in control of your finances and ready for what we hope will be a speedy recovery. Our agenda is fairly straightforward. We're going to talk about revisiting our financial priorities, what it takes to make a new spending plan and how that should be focused. I'm going to share with you some places to find money. All of us would benefit from finding some money, and I think some of these you'll find rather fun. Also going to talk about expanding spending power. I'll explain what that is and why that might be very, very helpful. And lastly, we're going to talk about investment accounts, whether during these fairly unsettled times, it makes sense to buy, to hold, or to sell. Most of us remember what happened in the middle of March when a pandemic was declared and businesses were shut down. We were all told to shelter in place. It was a frightening time, and the market sold off in a dramatic fashion. The number one question I've gotten from people, and these are people, some of them working, some of them no longer working, was what do I do about my investments? So we're going to talk about what you should do during these periods of market uncertainty. When we talk about revisiting our financial priorities, I think we can all agree that the past 10 weeks that we have been working from home, sometimes, learning how to Zoom, many of us with kids home from school who have to be kept on task with their schoolwork and staying engaged. Some of us have experienced downturns in our businesses, or many people, layoffs or furloughs. So it has really forced us to think about what are our financial priorities? What is it important that we have the money to pay for? Think back on the pre-pandemic days. Most of us were fairly focused on lifestyle spending. Just think back what January was like. We started 2020 after a year when the S&P 500 was up more than 30%. Unemployment was at record lows. The stock market continued to go up in January and February. So most of the people I was talking to and counseling were looking at things, particular financial goals like house renovations, relocations, fixing up apartments, paying for cruises, fancy vacations, getting ready for secure retirements, things like that. A great deal of it was very lifestyle focused. A lot of talk about travel and trips, weddings and celebrations. And that made sense. It was a great time. Since the pandemic, roughly the middle of March, most of us have been forced to think about our personal safety, our financial safety, and solvency, remaining able to pay our bills. And this is because with the slowdown, the shutdown in businesses to deal with the pandemic, many people were out of work, many furloughed, some laid off, and many that I've spoken to who have had to take salary reductions or hour reductions that have left them with less money coming in. So that's where we are right now. And while it feels good to be stepping into phase 3 of reopening in Westchester, we hope that the progress continues and businesses continue to reopen. Shopping becomes more normal. We're out and about. We can safely go out to eat, meet with friends, all of that. But we have to bear in mind that nothing is guaranteed. And while in the metro New York area, things look good, our prospects are bright, things are certainly much, much better than they were a month ago, there is the possibility that that could turn. There could be another hot zone or hotspot. There could be a second wave, as many of the health experts are warning about. So we have to bear in mind that our focus on financial security and solvency should stay front of mind in through the fall and certainly, well, more likely through the end of the year. Once we are out of this pandemic experience, and there will come a time, whether it's with the vaccinations or it's with better treatments, less infection, we will be in a period of cautious rebuilding of our personal finances, of certain businesses. All of that is something to look forward to. But I would argue that we are going to have a different attitude toward money and financial security as a result of this experience. It has been much longer that we've lived in this state of uncertainty and watched a very volatile stock market. It's gone up dramatically of late, but earlier it was up and down, and the changes were dramatic and rather frightening. I think we will be much more cautious. In fact, I was reading that cash balances sitting in savings accounts and money market accounts have reached nearly an all-time high. And this reflects the fact that people are being more prepared, being much more cautious about the future. So action step number one, in terms of revisiting our financial priorities, we're going to focus on what we can control. There is a tendency when you are sitting generally in isolation in your home, trying to work or trying to find a job, trying to manage what seems like an unmanageable situation, to just worry and stress about this. And so what we want to do is focus on the things that we actually can control, which is empowering. We want to make sure that if we do make changes to our finances, that we take constructive actions. Don't do anything out of panic, out of fear. Do something constructive, because that's the key to enhancing both your emotional and financial well-being. What can we control? Number one, our spending on non-essentials. I think all of us have had a chance to think about what do we really need to spend money on, and what could we as easily live without. So it's been a time to meditate on our priorities. The other thing we can control is beating ourselves up, which is a very common tendency, to rethink negatively decisions we may have made when things were better, the end of last year, or in January, or in February. I've spoken to many, many people who were very upset to have signed a new car lease at the beginning of the year, or moved into a new, more expensive apartment, bought a house, made a lot of financial commitments, maybe run up some credit card debt that they're now not in a position to pay off as quickly as they hoped. And thinking about that and beating yourself up for having done that is simply not helpful. It's emotionally draining, and it's not constructive. Ruminating is the woulda, shoulda, coulda, and this is a tendency among a lot of investors. It's a very common behavioral trait where you rethink and you worry about decisions you made or did not make with respect to your investment portfolios. People who have large retirement portfolios, for example, often ruminate unconstructively about whether they should have rebalanced. Maybe they shouldn't have gotten back into the stock market. Maybe they shouldn't have sold when they sold. Not helpful. Want all of us to stop participating in these unconstructive, unhelpful behaviors. So what can we do? What is constructive? Number one, let's all take control by creating a new spending plan. Now, a spending plan is a friendlier, better name for a budget. And I'm not saying here that all of us need to begin budgeting, now and forever. Uh, Only 48% of Americans have a regular written budget. What I am saying is that in a time of transition, which we are in, between being in the shutdown and being potentially back to work and the new normal, it can be super helpful to create even just a documentation of your budget. What money do you have coming in, and what are you spending on? Obviously, in terms of priorities, we're going to be focused still on essentials. We have to make sure that we have the basics covered before we start spending on going out to restaurants, hopefully eventually taking trips, all of these other things that are great to have, but certainly, as we've learned sitting on our couches, not essential. We still want to preserve cash. We are hopeful for the future, but we don't know what it holds. And lastly, we have to recognize that we may have lower income for a period of time. If you've been furloughed, if you've taken a pay cut, we have to acknowledge that reality and accommodate it. So I know telling everyone to create a budget or a spending plan does not sound like a lot of fun. I'm going to walk through the mechanics rather quickly, but I want to make it a little bit fun. So here's what we're going to do first. I want you to round up your February credit card and bank statements. Now, why February? Because we were not in lockdown, and February was a great month. There were some school holidays, so a lot of people were traveling. They may have been skiing. They may have been doing lots of things that we haven't done in the past 10 weeks, like traveling, dining out, getting our hair done, miss that, entertaining, going to the theater, and attending live events. All of that was how we normally lived. When things are good, when we're earning money, this was perfectly normal, and it was really a happy time. But as we look at it, we haven't been doing this, all of these particular activities. We haven't been spending on these things. So it's been an opportunity to really pull in our spending needs and to think more constructively about what you will begin spending on again as things open up. Next, to actually formally start to make a budget, you want to look at April or May. Either one of those months, if you look specifically at your bank statement from which you pay all of your bills, including your credit card bills, this is going to give you, if you add up your ATM, your debit withdrawals, any electronic or Zelle payments, and all your checks, that's going to represent 100% of your monthly spending under the COVID lockdown. So bottom line, that's essential. Those are your essential expenses. In June, you've probably noticed that as things have opened up, you are doing more takeout. You are getting out, possibly shopping, putting gas in the car, and at least getting around. So your expenses and your spending patterns are going to change. They're going to loosen up a little. But you've had an opportunity to really look at what your bottom line number is. If you really had to shrink your budget, that's what you shrank it to. Action 2, again, with your new spending plan, it should reflect current priorities. Obviously, we've all learned that number one, make sure we've got enough money for food and medicine. Those are essential. Keeping up our health insurance, if we're paying it on our own, and other insurance premiums. We need our cell phones and the internet to do our Zoom calls. Keep the lights on and the gas. Rent or mortgage. And if anyone has deferred making a rent payment or a mortgage payment, you've probably seen in the paper that certainly in New York City, the opportunity to do that for 90 days is expiring. And so there are landlords who may well take people to court to compel payment. Beyond that, if you've had credit card debt, making those payments, even if they are minimum payments, and paying back loans, things that are important, but you've had an opportunity to defer those as well. And certainly with student loans, federal student loans, those have been on hiatus since mid-March, March 13th to September. No obligation to pay and no interest accruing. So that's been an opportunity to save on that particular expense. In New York, we are fortunate to have the Department of Financial Services, which regulates virtually every financial service in the state. So insurance companies, issuers of private student loans, banks, credit card issuers, other types of loans and mortgages all have to answer to the Department of Financial Services. And what's very interesting and very helpful is to go on to their website, which you have here, and to look at their notifications regarding coronavirus. They put a lot of pressure on companies that do financial services businesses in the state of New York to make sure that they were as flexible as possible. If ATMs and bank fees were to be waived, everything was to be done to help New York consumers. So it's a wealth of information about what has been available. It's also got a great FAQ on the CARES Act to understand what opportunities there are if you're having trouble with a mortgage or a credit card or a loan. It's a helpful resource. Action steps to preserve savings. It really has been a good time to review credit card statements. Most of us have done this already, but I spun around the other day and realized that I've been paying for a couple of subscriptions that I'm not using, and it's time to turn those things off. If you haven't done it already, your gym membership might be something to turn off since gyms are not yet open, and there's no point paying for it every month for something you can't use. You should be able to suspend it. Unwanted subscriptions, auto billing for things like monthly commuter tickets, that would make sense. It's a good time to also negotiate a new cable package or a cell phone or data plan. Remember that as customers of those particular service providers, they're not going to come to you with the next best, cheapest program. You have to call them more or less to complain to get into a better data plan or cell phone program. I did this recently, and I was amazed how much we were overpaying for data plans on all of our household cell phones. Had I not called, we'd still be paying at the old rate. Auto renewals for memberships or contributions. Many people do charitable contributions. This may be a time to suspend those until your work situation is more certain. The other thing to do, if you haven't been driving your car for the last 10 weeks or not driving it as much as you used to, you might be able to get a low mileage discount with your auto insurer, and that's worth pursuing. Let's move on to action step number 3 and talk about rounding up money that belongs to you. I talk a lot about the missingmoney.com website. I bring it up in many, many different presentations. This is an aggregator site that will take you to your state's comptroller's website, where they record money that has not been claimed. At present, the New York Comptroller of the Currency, Thomas DiNapoli, has $16.5 billion in unclaimed funds. I'm hoping some of this money is yours. When you go on Missing Money, you'll see a button that says search. You hit the search button, it's going to ask your name, your city, your state. This is what's going to take you to the New York State Comptroller's website. They'll ask you for your middle initial and confirm your address. And what's going to come up are all sorts of unclaimed funds. If you ever moved and turned off Con Edison and were owed a refund for part of a month's fee, security deposits, life insurance proceeds. I actually had a gentleman, I ran this for him, And he found that he was the beneficiary of the proverbial, rich uncle who died and left him a life insurance policy. He never knew about it, never claimed it until we found it in the missing money. Gift cards can also show up here, store credits that were issued and never used. And you can follow the link and claim this money. It's an easy process to start through the state's website. Another opportunity for claiming money that belongs to you, if you are due a tax and income tax refund for 2017, 2018, or this year, 2019, and remember that tax returns are due on July 15th, really owe it to yourself to file using Free File, if you're eligible, to get that refund. It's all online for the most part. It's fairly simple, and the companies that offer Free File services are pretty easy. You can figure out which one is most appropriate for you, whether you're due a refund for the federal and the state, and send that in. Remember that you've only got 3 years to claim a refund. After that, it's gone. You forfeit it. If you have any dependent kids who had wage earnings in 2019 less than $9,000, and if you had a kid in school, maybe a summer job last year for your high school or college kid, they can file using Free File. Make sure they indicate that they are a dependent on your 1040, and they can get their withholdings back at the federal and state level. This can be a significant amount of money, and since many of them are going to struggle to find summer jobs this year, this might be a nice way to refill the piggy bank. If you continued to make your federal student loan payments, and I've talked to a number of people where this was true because it's automated, the money was simply swept out of their checking account every month, so they paid in March and April before they realized they were eligible. You can file to get a refund since you are not obligated to make those payments. No interest is accruing on any federal student loans, so you might as well get these payments back. If you're in the Public Service Loan Forgiveness Program, you're getting credit for those particular months, even though you have no payment due. It takes about 2 weeks after contacting your loan servicing agency to get a check for that refund, but you might as well go get it. Other money that belongs to you. Refunds for airline tickets. Most of the airlines that serve American passengers have been browbeaten into liberalizing their refund policies. Many of them, for people who had booked trips and tickets back in January or February for much later in the year, many of the airlines wait until that flight is actually canceled at the time that you were to have taken the trip before being in a position to process refunds. But you should go through your credit cards and look for all of these. Same thing for canceled event tickets. If you bought tickets to events at museums or concert venues, these are being canceled and refunded, but again, fairly close to when the event was to take place. Other rebates, your car insurance company, many of them, automatically sent a rebate or reduced your monthly or quarterly insurance fee. If they haven't, if you're not among the companies, and at AARP, they had a list of the companies that were proactive in doing this. You can find out if one was offered if you asked. Remember that most of these financial companies will respond if you inquire, but may not be forthcoming and do it automatically. Other money that belongs to you. A lot of people are walking around with significant cash balances on Venmo. Now you have an opportunity. They've changed Venmo a little bit. You can move that money into your bank where it might be more available for you to spend on other things as you need it, or you can put it into a savings account, earn a little bit of interest, which it's not getting at Venmo. Another opportunity might be your credit card reward balance. Many of us have been accumulating points balances to use for future travel. Future travel is fairly uncertain. Some cards do give you the option of using that balance to pay your current credit card bill, or sending you an actual check for the dollar value of that balance. If you're
Anthea,
looking to, yes?
I'm sorry to interrupt. Some folks are not familiar with Venmo. Can you just explain what
Oh,
that is,
sure.
please?
Sure, I'm happy to. Venmo is a phone app that you can use to exchange money with friends and family. So if you've heard of like PayPal that you use, most people use it if they're on eBay, but you can use it to pay for other things. Venmo is another way to do that using your phone. And most people use it to like split checks. You go out for drinks with your buddies and you Venmo the check. So one person puts it on a credit card and everybody chips in their $10 or $15. My husband uses it, and I get on him about this, playing golf with his friends, and they do their betting and money exchange using Venmo, which I think is ridiculous, but that's what he does with it. You used to only be able to send money through Venmo, and you fund it first out of your checking account, so you seed your account with something, but you used not to be able to transfer it back to your checking account. Now you can. They've made that easier because people realize if you're going to be a payment system, you got to be able to get it back into the bank. Okay. Does that help? Does that answer the questions? Okay.
He had a follow-up, and I can kind of jump in here too. He just asked, "Is Venmo is used for Uber?" It depends on how you set up your Uber payment on your app. Venmo
Yes.
is more, think of Venmo like a PayPal or.
Yes, it is like PayPal. It's a competitor to PayPal. When they came out, they were very accommodating of very small dollar transactions, like splitting checks. So it was very popular among college kids and young adults going out. Was where it kind of got its start.
Because nobody carries cash anymore.
It seems like.
I think we're good. You can go ahead.
Okay. Another opportunity. All of us seem to have a drawer somewhere filled with unused or partially used gift cards. And I found a great article online at moneypantry.com that lists all the best places to sell gift cards. And it can be different depending on what kind of gift card you have. So, for example, if you have an iTunes card that you're never going to use, you sell that on one particular website. If you have a Best Buy, if you have a Bed Bath and Beyond, all of them have a somewhat optimal place for you to get the most value for selling this gift card. So rather than have them moldering in your desk drawer, eventually becoming credits on the unclaimed funds, this might be a place to actually turn them into usable cash. Another final source of cash that I like to remind people about, and I say this as a financial planner who's met many, many people who've opened Roth IRAs and not invested the money. I'm not sure why this happens more with Roth IRAs than traditional IRAs, but I meet many people who put it in there, don't really invest it, and it's just sort of sitting there in cash. One of the unique features of a Roth IRA is that you may withdraw your contributions, not your earnings, but your original contributions without any tax or penalty. What this means and why this is valuable, and why I recommend, for example, particularly for younger people when they're starting out and they get a little bit of extra money, maybe they get a tax refund or a small bonus, and they ask, how can I invest this? What should I do with it? I'll recommend, why don't you set up a Roth? Because if things get tough and they need money for whatever reason, they have access to it. They can take out that contribution without any tax or penalty. Okay. Even if you did invest it at this point, if you invested it in an equity fund, it is likely up from where it was in late March after the market slide. And so you could take out your contributions, leave your earnings in there to continue, hopefully, to grow and compound, and use that money as you need it. All right, now I'd like to spend some time explaining what spending power is.
I'll probably just put one of those little
Spending power is our ability to spend money based on our income, plus our savings, plus our access to credit. Most of us walking around have a credit card. Some of us have a mortgage, a car loan. So we have credit histories, credit scores, and the ability to access more credit. One of the things that you can do, and this can be extremely helpful if you are in or anticipating a financially uncertain period, is to consider extending your credit limits. Say you've had a Visa card and you've been fine with that card having a limit of $500, forever. You use it a little bit, you pay it, maybe you carry a balance sometimes, but $500 has been fine. Well, if you go through something like the COVID lockdown, where maybe you don't have a paycheck, right? Your hours have been cut, you've been furloughed, whatever it is, now would be helpful to have more than a $500 credit limit, because maybe you would end up putting things like your groceries on that. So it may make sense to review your existing credit cards and think about which cards have a good interest rate and might be good candidates for extending the credit limits. Now, this was easy in the early days of our lockdown. The credit card companies were very, very generous, very willing to let people extend their credit because most people were still employed. If you've been furloughed, that might be a challenge because they're going to want to verify that you have income. But at the same time, people are beginning to return to work. So there is an expectation among the people who follow credit card companies and what the latest best deals are, that it's going to get easier again to extend credit limits. Similarly, one of the things I was telling people very, very early on, throughout the month of March and into April, was to consider applying for a 0% credit card. Just buy it as a backup plan. You have a job now, but what if that job disappears or there's an interruption in your income of any sort? Wouldn't it be helpful to be able to pay for essential expenses like your cell phone bill, like your groceries, like your dog food, whatever it is, using a 0% credit card where you wouldn't be charged interest? You could just carry the balance and then plan to pay it off once things were more settled financially. 0% credit cards right now are a little bit harder to get because once the downturn happened, they became a little bit leery of it getting too extended and giving people access to too much credit that they wouldn't be able to repay. Here again, now that the economy is reopening, now that certain industries seem to be coming back, this is expected to become more liberal again. And, just as a backup plan, should we have another wave of infection in the fall where we have another temporary slowdown or whatever, might be good to have one of these. If you own your apartment or home, it might also be a good idea or something to consider to apply for either a cash out home equity loan. So you tap the equity in your property. You have that money that you can put in the bank and hold as cash and plan to pay it back once your income is more stable, or a line of credit. This could be helpful. The cost of it is really the application cost. If you don't use the line of credit, if you never really tap it and spend the money on anything, you're not charged interest. It's an airbag, just a consideration for getting through potentially additional hard times. Options for preserving savings. If you're in a situation of reduced income or furlough, waiting to start a new job, etc., there is no harm in paying the minimum right now on your credit cards until you have more money coming in. If your cash flows are such that that's what you can afford to do, just to stay current with your bills. Obviously, if you're no longer making charges, the balance will go down a little bit. You are being charged interest, but this will get you through this difficult period. If you are eligible for a 0% balance transfer card, this could make this process a little bit easier since you wouldn't be being charged interest on the balance, although there is a balance transfer fee that is a small percentage of the balance amount that you transfer. Places to look at these different offers and to consider what might be right for you include Bankrate.com, which is an aggregator site. Virtually every financial company, reputable financial company, advertises their products on Bankrate.com. And one of the benefits is, particularly as you're looking at credit card offers, you can make apples to apples comparisons because all of them are forced to present their information in exactly the same format. And this is far easy to navigate as a consumer than looking at the stuff that Citibank and Bank of America might mail to your home, where you have to read the offer, wade through the fine print and figure out what the real deal is. It's much easier to do this comparison shopping on Bankrate.com. I have NerdWallet and Magnify Money up here because they do very good roundups of the best types of different kinds of credit cards. So they will do the best travel rewards credit cards, the best zero balance balance transfer credit cards. And they'll do that, say, for 2020, sometimes quarterly. And it's a good way to learn about cards that you might not have been aware of. And then you can go to Bankrate, look at the details, and actually start the application process there. The other option that I did mention or want to mention is if you are currently paying a mortgage, now might be a good time to think about refinancing it. I don't know if you've noticed in the papers, but mortgage rates are again at a tremendous low. 30-year mortgages are roughly 3.5%. They had been, north of 4 not that long ago, as things were going so well in the early part of this year. And so if this makes sense for you, for example, if you have been paying a mortgage at a higher rate than that for a number of years, you have a lower balance, you could refinance that balance at a lower interest rate, and that would result in a lower payment. And you could decide whether you want to extend back out for 30 years or take a 15-year. But that could be a way to improve your cash flows on a monthly basis. If you're feeling like you need to boost your cash savings for the foreseeable future, it is possible to do a cash out refinance where you tap some of that equity. Maybe you put that in the bank and you hold on to it for emergency use. You refinance, you get the lower APR, and depending on how much money you take out, perhaps you end up with the same monthly payment. But now you have money in the bank that you can hold on to for emergency use. If you end up not using that money for the emergency, you can obviously repay it. You can also, if you hold on to that refinanced mortgage, you can take a tax deduction if you use it for making renovations to your property. We're at our final action step, which regards investment accounts. And here is my counsel for people. We've been through some crazy market situations. If you pay attention to what's been happening, you probably remember the day, I believe it was March 23rd, when the market sank dramatically. It was the largest one-day decline. It was stunning, and people were very, very unnerved by this. For those who were still working during the period that followed, and even now, we still have days of great volatility, dramatic upswings, dramatic downturns. A lot of it is driven by the articles and press about vaccine prospects and treatment prospects, or conversely, new outbreaks, new problems, things like that. So that is still driving a lot of the market volatility. But if you're still working, it is in your best interest to continue to buy into the market. And where are the best places for you to do that? Number one, your 401k plan, or if you work for a nonprofit or the government, your 403b plan. That should always be the first place you look, particularly for the tax deduction, is to make sure you're optimizing what you're contributing to the 401k, to your retirement savings plan at work. I had people come to me and say that they had suspended their contributions, even though they were still working and their income had not changed. They were just so nervous about the markets, and I had to persuade them, this is a great time to buy. You're buying at a lower price. This is better than buying back in December or January when the market was much higher. So continue contributing and benefiting from the long-term compounding of those returns. If you have money and are able to do it, consider making a traditional or Roth IRA contribution. Again, it's an opportunity to put some money to work. This is still a good time to invest. It will likely be volatile. I will caution you, next week is the end of the quarter. And what happens at the end of a calendar quarter? You have a lot of institutional money managers making portfolio changes. We've had a big run up in the stock market. We have a lot of balanced accounts that are balanced portfolios that should be half stock, half bonds that are very unbalanced. They have too much stock. That stock will be sold, bonds will be bought. There is an expectation, if you read financial press, that the amounts of money that will leave stock investments before we're on the 30th will be significant. Billions of dollars will be transferred, sold and transferred out of stock funds and put into bond funds for this rebalancing in institutional accounts. So be aware, we may have some volatility as a result, and this may be an investing opportunity if you're looking to open your traditional IRA before the January 15th deadline or a Roth IRA. Another opportunity that most people should consider is to simply set up an account with a mutual fund company, for example, like Vanguard, Fidelity, Schwab. Pick a low-cost, broadly diversified index fund, maybe an S&P 500 index fund, maybe a total market index fund. You're not paying a lot of expense for these. It will move as the market moves. Then set it up, open it with the minimum investment amount, but set it up so that every month the same amount of money gets transferred out of your checking account, maybe you send $100, and gets invested in that fund. You're creating another 401k type of investment. And if you do this over time, if you just leave this in place, you don't mess around with it, you let it continue to be contributed to and to grow and to go up and down, this could end up being a fairly significant amount of money in 5 to 10 years. It will also be available to you. You can obviously sell it, use the money if you needed it during this time. It's not retirement money per se, so there aren't any penalties for accessing it before age 59 and a half. If you needed to start at a smaller amount than that, I want to make you aware of the Acorns app. If you attended the budgeting presentation I gave in January, I brought it up there. I'm very impressed with the Acorns app. It allows you to invest as little as $5 a month, transferred out of your checking account into a legitimate brokerage account where your $5 will be invested in a portfolio of Vanguard exchange traded funds. Now, it is the same opening up an Acorns account as it is setting up a brokerage account at Fidelity. You're going to answer questions about your available liquid assets, your investment horizon, your risk tolerance. Are you aggressive? Are you moderately aggressive? Or are you conservative? What's your investment time horizon? When do you need this money? And it will more or less guide you into the right managed portfolio for as little as $5 a month. Now, it costs $1 a month for this service, but you can increase that amount. You can also make occasional dump-ins. Say you get a little bonus or you get that tax refund. You can put that into your Acorns account. What I really like about this is not only the ability to start for so little money, they do a very good job presenting the concepts of investing, providing some investment education. I've been very impressed. I have a little Acorns account. Yes, I only put in $5 a month, but I read all the newsletters they send out. When the market does something dramatic, they send a little explanation of what's happening. So you will slowly become much more knowledgeable about investing and the markets by virtue of this little starter account. Okay. People who are retired or not presently working are probably best advised to hold in spite of some of this market volatility. What I don't want people to feel they have to do is to sell out. That is often not the best thing to do. If you're retired and your monthly income, whether it's from Social Security or a pension or savings, covers your essential expenses, there's no reason to sell your stock investments out of a panic. So I want to encourage people to be thoughtful about this. You never want to act in a panic. And one of the reasons I say this is that what I learned from many investors after 2008, those who sold into that giant market decline very often were the very last people to start investing again. And it was not just money in brokerage accounts. People moved their 401k balances into cash, and it stayed in cash for years. And they missed the eventual run up in the market that would have made them whole in a fairly reasonable amount of time. So you never want to be invested more aggressively than you are comfortable with. Your risk tolerance is something to take very seriously and to understand about yourself. How much could you afford to lose? How comfortable would you be if your account value did go down? You want to be able to hang tight when things are volatile so that you don't make a bad mistake. Okay. If you're in a situation where you are short on savings, perhaps running low on money, facing a loss of income, then you are in a situation where it may make sense to sell. So how to think about selling? Where and what would you sell? Obviously, you're probably going to look first at your taxable accounts. You know, if you're under age 59 and a half and you sell something and take money out of your retirement account, you pay income taxes. You also pay a 10% excise penalty tax. So if you have money that is sitting in a brokerage account, it makes sense to look at that first. Many bond funds are up in value. Those can be an opportunity, to consider taking that money out. But you also have equity funds now. Initially in March, we had equity funds that had modest losses. Now we have some with some nice gains. So you might want to look at harvesting some of that money and putting that into your cash funds. I'll explain the buckets. I'm a big fan of the three bucket portfolio scheme for planning your investments. You have your long-term investments. That's the blue bucket to the far right. These are funds that you're not going to touch for 7 to 10 years or longer. So this is going to be, for example, your retirement fund. Your retirement fund, that should be invested in diversified, low-cost stock investments, index funds, and ETFs. Your intermediate money, which is represented by the green bucket, is money you might need within 5 to 7 years. So as you sell out of your stock portfolio, you move money into this intermediate bucket. And what might be in there if you are at or in retirement? You might have bank CDs, you might have some fixed annuities, you might have some REIT funds, things that generate income. The income that this green bucket produces gets transferred into the orange bucket. This is your cash bucket. This is how you pay your bills. It is advisable to have 1 to 2 years worth of cash available at retirement for your essential expenses. So that's not, all your trips and all of your discretionary lifestyle spending, but your basic expenses for running your household. And that's what sits in the orange cash bucket. Okay. It's simply a framing device, it's helpful in terms of getting people to understand the difference between money you hold for the long term to cash that you need for your immediate expenses. So in summary, we've talked about the necessity, the importance of revisiting our financial priorities, how and why to make a new spending plan, reflecting our new appreciation for the experience we've gone through and the need to have cash and be mindful of our expenses. Shared a few ways to find money, and I hope you find some on the missingmoney.com website. How to expand your spending power, to leverage your good credit score to help you through periods of uncertainty. And then lastly, how to think about and handle your investment accounts. And I want to let you see all of these different websites that I've referenced throughout the presentation in case you'd like to write any of these down as we turn to questions.